It's strange how the smallest spaces can hold the heaviest secrets. I never imagined my life would narrow down to a single room, one bed pushed against the wall, and a narrow strip of floor we both had to share. After my marriage collapsed, the rent for a larger place was out of reach, and so this cramped, dimly lit room became our entire world. My son was 19, tall enough to make the space feel even smaller, his presence always close, his belongings stacked neatly against one corner while mine crowded the other. Privacy was a luxury we no longer had, and each day felt like a balancing act between comfort and intrusion. Our mornings were quiet but rushed, both of us getting ready in a silent dance to avoid bumping into each other. He'd often leave early, his backpack slung over one shoulder, phone in hand, barely touching breakfast. I tried not to question his comings and goings. After all, he was almost an adult now. But the mother in me couldn't help noticing the way his eyes avoided mine more often than before. Evenings were the only time we really talked. Sometimes he'd tell me little bits about his day, but other times he seemed lost in thought, distracted, as if carrying a weight he didn't want to share. I had my own burdens. My heart still felt tethered to someone I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. My partner and I had been distant for months, our conversations short and tense, my doubts quietly growing. I told myself it was stress, the strain of finances, the awkwardness of my current living situation. But in truth, something inside me already knew there was more to it. I just wasn't ready to face it. At night, I'd sometimes wake to the faint glow of his phone in the dark, his fingers moving quickly over the screen. Once, I caught the sound of his low laughter, warm and intimate in a way I hadn't heard from him in years. I thought little of it at first. Friends, I told myself. Late-night jokes. But the tone stayed in my mind, unsettling, as if there was more behind it than casual conversation. It was a Wednesday when I noticed the first detail that truly unsettled me. He came home late, hair slightly disheveled, carrying a paper bag with a small box inside. When I asked what it was, he hesitated before saying it was for a friend. I believed him, at least, I wanted to. But hours later, when he had gone to sleep, I caught sight of the edge of the box sticking out from under his jacket. It was familiar in a way I couldn't place. I pushed the thought away, convincing myself it was nothing. Still, the seed of suspicion had been planted, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, it was already beginning to grow. He began spending more time outside, his absences stretching longer into the night. When he was home, there was a new restlessness in him. Checking his phone constantly, slipping outside to take calls in a low voice. I told myself it was normal for someone his age, but deep down, unease had started to creep in. The closeness we once shared now felt fragile, replaced by an invisible wall I couldn't break through. One evening, as I sat on the edge of the bed folding laundry, I caught the faint sound of my partner's name drifting from his voice. It was muffled, buried in a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear, but my heart stuttered. I froze, my hands motionless over a shirt, straining to catch the rest. His words dropped to a whisper, and moments later, I heard the faint click of him ending the call. When he came back into the room, he avoided my gaze, mumbling something about stepping out for a walk. The days that followed only deepened the gnawing tension in my chest. I noticed a silver bracelet lying on his desk one afternoon. Simple, delicate, and unmistakably feminine. I'd seen one exactly like it before, on my partner's wrist. My fingers hovered over it for a moment, fighting the urge to pick it up, before I quickly turned away. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe I was letting my imagination run wild. That night, lying in the dark, I could hear his breathing from the other side of the room. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying every odd glance, every strange pause, every moment that had seemed just a little off. Was I losing my grip on reality? Was I being paranoid? I hated myself for even entertaining the thought that my own son might be entangled in something so unthinkable. And yet, the feeling refused to leave. Then came the night when the unease almost tipped into certainty. I had dozed off but woke to the faint vibration of his phone. His face was lit by the screen, eyes darting across it with a smile I couldn't place, soft, knowing, almost romantic. For a moment, I thought about asking who it was. But I stayed silent, pretending to shift in my sleep, just to see if he would hide it. He did. The phone slipped under his pillow instantly, his body turning away from me. I felt my stomach knot, a heaviness pressing against my ribs. Something was happening, something I wasn't supposed to know. And for the first time, I began to wonder if the truth, when it came, would be far worse than my imagination. It happened on a night when the air in the room felt heavier than usual, thick with an unspoken tension I couldn't quite name. I had told him I'd be out late visiting a friend, but instead, I lingered nearby, my steps slow, my mind clouded with suspicion. Something in me wanted, needed, to know. I returned quietly, the creak of the door barely audible as I pushed it open. At first, I thought the room was empty. Then I heard it, soft murmurs, low laughter, and a voice I knew far too well. My partner's. The sound wasn't coming from a phone this time. It was here, inside my room. My heart slammed against my ribs as I stepped closer, my breath catching when I saw them. My partner and my son, together, the closeness between them unmistakable. The world seemed to slow, each second stretching painfully long. My partner's eyes widened when they met mine, a flash of guilt sweeping across her face. My son froze, his expression caught between shock and something I couldn't even name. In that moment, I couldn't speak. No words could form against the tide of disbelief crashing through me. The air was thick with betrayal, and I stood there, feeling as though the walls were closing in. I didn't scream. I didn't demand explanations. Instead, I let the silence speak for me, because in that silence, everything was already answered. The whispers, the late nights, the jewelry, they all formed a clear, cruel picture. I felt my legs weaken, my hands trembling uncontrollably, a cold wave spreading through my chest. A part of me wanted to turn away and pretend it hadn't happened, to convince myself I'd misread the scene. But the truth was in their faces, in the way neither of them could hold my gaze. The air between us was no longer just heavy, it was poisoned. Without a word, I stepped back toward the door, my breath uneven, my vision blurring at the edges. My hand lingered on the handle for a moment, the weight of the choice pressing on me. I could stay and demand every sordid detail, or I could walk away from the sight that had just shattered everything I believed about my family. I chose to leave, but as the door clicked shut behind me, the sound seemed final, like the closing of a chapter one had never agreed to write. And in that quiet hallway, with my heart pounding in my ears, I realized my life had just been split in two, before that night and after it. Morning came like an unwelcome reminder that nothing would ever be the same. The room felt colder, though the air was still. He sat on the edge of the bed, head bowed, scrolling through his phone as if pretending nothing had happened. My partner's belongings were gone, no trace of her except for the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in the air, cruel in its persistence. We moved around each other without speaking, every sound, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of clothing, carrying the weight of unspoken truth. Finally, I asked him to sit down. My voice was steady, but inside, I was trembling. He avoided my eyes at first, but when I repeated myself, he looked up, and in that single glance, I knew he would confess. The words came haltingly, broken by pauses that felt endless. He admitted everything, how it started, how it just happened, how they never meant for me to find out. Each sentence was like a blade, cutting deeper than the last. There was no apology strong enough to undo what had been done. My son's face was pale, his voice cracking under the weight of his own guilt, but the damage was irreversible. I listened in silence until he was finished. Then I told him, in the calmest voice I could muster, that trust, once shattered, never fits back together the same way. I didn't shout, didn't cry in front of him. Instead, I let the stillness speak, because my silence hurt more than any words could. Later that day, I called my partner. Her voice was low, almost resigned, as she tried to explain, but I didn't need her story. I told her it was over, that whatever we had was gone long before I walked into that room. There was no anger left in me, only a hollow space where love used to be. When the day ended, I sat alone in that same small room, staring at the walls that had witnessed too much. I thought about how a single space could hold laughter, secrets, and heartbreak all at once. And I understood something I hadn't before. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people we'd have defended with our last breath. The room was still, the light fading into evening, and I whispered to myself, almost like a prayer, Some scars never fade, but they do remind us who we can't trust again. And with that, I knew the healing wouldn't come quickly, but it would come, one day, far from this room.